A commercial letter of intent, an LOI, is kind of like dating, right? And if you're not careful, you could find yourself married to a clause that you really don't like. So that's what I'm talking about today. Stick around. Hi, welcome back. My name's Joe Brown. I'm a commercial real estate broker with Century 21, List with Begans, located in South Tampa. Thank you so much for being here. So, I do videos almost every week. And at least once a month, I want to do a commercial video, and that's what today is. I'm talking about commercial letters of intent and what they are and why it matters and why it's important to you, but then also some structure to it, right? So first of all, a letter of intent is kind of like a framework for a transaction. And it could be for a purchase or a lease. And so it's really more than a handshake. It really is a framework. So the LOI gives the framework for the business details. Now, first of all, most of these, it's written clearly. This is non-binding. However, there are some parts that are binding, and those have to be spelled out. I'll talk about that in a second. But really, it's on paper, back and forth negotiation before it gets to an attorney drawing up the purchase or the lease agreement. A good letter of intent, again, LOI, spells out who are the parties involved, what finances are we talking about. The good thing about LOIs is it's a sign of seriousness, right? Both parties are telling each other, we are serious about this transaction. So let's talk about some key elements in an LOI. Number one, it would be who are the parties involved, the legal parties. So it won't say like Joe Puffy Cheeks Brown. That is not my nickname, by the way. But you use legal names. Is it an individual that's buying or selling the property or leasing the property? Is it a LLC? Is it a corporation, an incorporation? So you spell out the legal names of the parties involved. And the reason for that, right, is somebody, so I prepare a letter of intent to purchase a building from a LLC, right? 5436 Southdale Maybury LLC. Well, I may negotiate with the president of the LLC. However, the LLC may have multiple directors or board members. So I don't want to list an individual name. I want to list the legal entity that's on the title. There's going to be a clear, concise purpose for the letter of intent, right? So Joe Brown, LLC, is presenting this letter of intent to purchase X property or to lease this property. It's a very clear, succinct line. That's what this letter of intent is about. And then I'm going to spell out the purchase or rent terms, right? I'm going to buy property X for this amount of money. Or I'm going to lease so much space. I'm going to lease 2,000 square feet at this address for 2 years or 3 years. Right? I spell all that out in the purchase terms. There are some key terms, especially for rents, for leases, that need to be spelled out. So number one is the term. How long is this lease good for? Is it 2 years, 3 years, 5 years? Is there an escalation clause that rents go up every year or every renewal? Talking about renewals, how many renewal options do I have? So I may sign a lease for 3 years, but then can I renew that lease for another 3 years? And how many renewal options do I have? Am I asking for tenant improvement allowance from the landlord? I'm going to spell that out. How about 3 months rent from the landlord? Again, I'm going to spell all that out in the letter of intent. And this is negotiated back and forth. So I may, in the initial LOI, I'll say, we want to rent the space for 3 years and have the tenant improvement. Instead of giving dollars, give 3 months free rent. And they may come back with, well, we can do a 5-year term with no tenant improvement allowance, right? So and we will escalate every 3 years, escalate the base rent every 3 years. Again, that's the back and forth negotiation of LOIs. In the LOI, I'm going to spell out the due diligence period. How long do we have for due diligence? And what aspects of due diligence are we going to look for? Is it going to be an environmental survey? Is it going to be financial studies? I'm going to put in there different contingencies that if we get to a point of contract, here are some contingencies that could void the contract. Number one is the inspections, right? I may see a beautiful building and the inspector says needs a new roof or the walls are about to fall down or whatever, right? So inspection contingency. The environmental inspection contingency, whether it's a phase 1 or phase 2 study. Financing contingency, right? I may purchase this, and again, this goes in the LOI. I may purchase this with financing. Well, if I can't get a financing loan, then that's a contingency that would void this contract. I talked about this earlier, there are some aspects of the LOI, even though we say it's non-binding, there are some areas that we do want to be binding. So number one is we want this whole negotiation to be kept confidential, right? We don't want the public knowing this negotiation is going on. If I'm asking for financial data, such as rent rolls, I want that information kept confidential, right? I don't want that information getting out. So that is spelled out in the LOI. Here are the binding clauses, right? Confidentiality. Another binding clause is exclusivity. So, for example, let's say there's a space for rent and we enter into an LOI negotiation, letter of intent, to lease this space. And my client says, I want to rent the space for 3 years at $20 a square foot. Well, and so we're going back and forth, negotiating the terms via the letter of intent. But at the same time, the landlord is negotiating with another tenant. And he says, hey, if you can pay $21 a square foot, that would be better. Well, you've spent this time and money doing the due diligence, negotiating for this lease. So you want to put in their exclusivity. While we are under these negotiations, then you stop marketing the property, right? So you want to spell that out because you could spend money for the inspections and due diligence And unless it's an exclusive agreement, you could lose that money if the landlord or owner entertains another offer. Deadlines, again, going back to LOI, you want to spell out deadlines and be specific. And what are the penalties if deadlines are missed? Or if deadlines need to be extended, how is that done? So again, a whole series of items goes into an LOI. We're going to sign it, and we're going to have the other party sign it. Right? It's written down and agreed to. Once the LOI, the terms are negotiated back and forth and agreed to, then the document can be given to an attorney to draw up the sales contract or the lease contract. Now, I would say with the sales contract, we have the standard commercial real estate purchase provided by the state of Florida. We could use that contract. Some sales are more complicated, and so you need a lawyer, real estate lawyer, to draw up the purchase and sale agreement, incorporating the terms of the LOI. And so it's important to negotiate those terms back and forth through the LOI. So then you can give it to your attorney and say, here are the terms we agree on. And they can draw up the lease agreement or purchase and sales agreement. So again, some key things. If you're working with an LOI or receive an LOI, here are some red flags, right? If they want financial data, but there's not an exclusivity or a confidentiality clause, that's a red flag, right? You should insist, especially if you're providing or requesting financial data, have that confidentiality agreement. If the legal names are not on the document, that's a red flag. If there are no dates, timelines associated, that's a red flag. But because then it could go on indefinitely, right? So a LOI could say, this letter of intent is in force until, is it 3 days from now, 5 days from now, 7 days, 2 months from now, right? It doesn't matter. It's up to the parties to put a timeline of when this LOI is in effect. As I said before, a letter of intent is not just a handshake for a transaction, but it's really a framework. And if an LOI is done properly, it saves a lot of drama in the future. However, if it's not done properly, it could lead to a court hearing, right? Unfortunately, that happens. So make sure that you're using a good LOI. Use a real estate agent that knows about LOIs and how to craft LOIs. In my show notes below, I'm going to put a link to if you're interested, you can schedule a call with me and just talk about what you're looking at or thinking about. And we can just talk about your real estate needs. Go to my website, joebrown-commercial.c21.com. I have some blogs out there. I want to put another link here. It's joebrown.live. This is a new WordPress site I started a couple months ago, but I have several commercial blogs out there that you can look at. So thank you so much for being here with me today. And until next week, take care.